My name's Dan Jagger, and this is Tapes and Tales.
Tapes and
Start that bit again. I'm going to do that whole paragraph again.
tapes and
Hello, welcome to the show. This is Tapes and Tales. We've got 3 stories for you, 3 pieces of fiction coming up for the show. The theme for this episode is nature's horrors, so it's going to get pretty dark pretty quickly. We've got a story from Bridge Williams and one from Gareth Heaton. But first up is a story from Andy Knudsen.
The Origins of Scars by Andy Knudsen. He didn't come to school for a few days, which meant he was ill again. And then we had an assembly about him, and that meant he was dead. A bit later, there was a mass for him at school, and his mother and father were there, crying and clutching each other's hands. Big people who looked bigger sat in a school hall full of little children. John was a kid, a couple of years older than me, but in the same year at school. Different class, but same year. He had been held back a couple of years because of his illness. I was 9, and the age difference seemed huge, like he was already a man. A feeling helped by the fact that his hair was exactly like my dad's, who was 40 at the time. They both had light, wispy hair that grew in thin patches, not like the thick covering my mum and I and other kids had. I asked my mum about John's hair, and if he wasn't really a little man who shouldn't be at school. She said he had had an operation, and that they had opened up his head to take something out. His hair grows thin because of the scars. Hair can't grow on scars, she said. I asked if Dad had scars on his head too, and she said no, he was just old. I asked what had been taken out of John's head, and she said a tumour. I asked what a tumour was. Something that grows where it shouldn't and needs to be removed with an operation. I asked if I might have a tumour in my head, and she said, no more questions. I saw John on my walk to school. I didn't walk to school in winter, my dad would drop me off early on his way to work. But in spring and summer, when the weather was good, I walked. John walked too. He lived nearer to school than I did. Sometimes I'd see him up ahead and I'd run to catch up. Sometimes he'd catch up with me, and sometimes I'd be walking past his house as he was stepping out. There were plenty of times when we didn't walk to school together, but I liked it when we did. John showed me his scars and told me about hospital. He had a lot of stories. I asked if he was all better now, and he smiled and said, "We'll see," which is what my parents said when they didn't want to say no. At school he was clever, but he wasn't allowed out to play. At break times he sat in the classroom reading or playing something gentle. The rest of us weren't allowed to stay in at break times, so he was always alone. We waved to each other sometimes. John had complications because of his tumour and his operation, and whenever he didn't turn up at school, I went to the school secretary at break time and asked if he was okay. Mrs. Furlong, she was nice. She would tell me he was just a bit ill. And usually he was back in school the next day or the day after. Once I told him I worried when he didn't come to school. He told me not to be soft. Then came the time he was off for a few days. I told Mrs. Furlong I was worried, and she told me not to be, but I could tell that she was too. She didn't smile and she wouldn't look at me, and she told me to go out to play. It was a while later that we had our assembly. After it, I hid in the toilets and tried to keep from crying too loud. Later still, we had mass. I couldn't take my eyes off John's parents. They must have missed their little man so much. I know I did. That was years ago. I have my own kids now. I barely resemble the 9-year-old I was. I have no pictures of John except for the images in my mind which time and faulty memory have doubtless bent from reality. But I still think of him, mostly on suburban streets on sunny days. A little man who knew more about life and death than I've ever done, and now knows more about what lies beyond than any of us.
Tapes
and
That was a story called The Origin of Scars by Andy Knudsen. It's a fantastic story. And we've got plenty of fantastic stories. So coming up, A Small Bird, a story from Bridge Williams. But first, part 2 is Nature's Beast by Gareth Heaton.
Tapes and Tales.
killer whales, a plate of dead snails, cancer. A kick in the ass. Windy days, the mind in a maze. Sun in your eyes, sourdough to pies. A man with no voice, lacking in choice. Oil spills, too many pills. Running out of fuel, a mistreated mule. They don't need a gun, forced to have fun. Splashed from a dodgy flag, imagine jet lag. An hang overhead, forced from your bed. Thinking about work, wishing they could shirk. No more beer, no more fear. A persistent cough. Thinking, with no thoughts. Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Morrison's, InBev, Molson Coors, JD Wetherspoons. Lack of individuality. Stay in bed a bit longer. Get up a bit earlier. Stroke dog's chin. Have some choice. Have a brew. Have a pint. Do something different. It's not that frightening. Do something different. I'll be surprised. Do something different. I'll be surprised about the results.
tapes.
A small bird. It's black and there's blue dots in black, blue dots swim in black and green haze in black, pulse, a breath, a gulp, small bellows, flashes and hops, clicks, joints bending, folding, bursting, black legs, there's legs here, to there, jerks from side to side, metal blues like stills. Cocked head, his eyes black, eyes. Bird. It's a small bird. Small bird will drop. What is that? It's leaves and seeds and twigs and circling, preening, drop frozen, dead. Those black eyes from a screen. It's a television, a table, a bed. This bed. I'm here. I'm still here. Oh God. Oh God. It's the mating display of some exotic bird of paradise on the television. He dances from side to side, flashing luminescent blue streaks from beneath his black breast. He hops from foot to foot, but his head remains fixed in space, his eyes unblinking and wild. I'm here. I've woken up here again. It's Animal Planet on the television. Suzanne leaves it on for the colours, I think. She thinks I may at least respond to the simple colours. My head is propped up on pillows so as to have the television in my direct line of sight all the time. The female bird isn't interested and flies away. His breast deflates, he pecks at the floor and kicks the dirt. He looks at the camera, pauses, he flies away. Small bird will drop frozen dead from a bough. Where is that from? I sense a movement in the corner of the room. Suzanne? I say, but there is silence. My brain forms and sends the words, but they're absorbed into the useless flesh of my body before they even make my mouth. I know it isn't Suzanne anyway, it's her. I can feel her. She gets up from her chair and I feel a cold drop in my stomach as she emerges from my peripheral vision. A tiny creature, a woman, but could be easily mistaken by her size for a teenager. She looks at me. I feel the same gaze of the animals in all these documentaries. There's silence, but for the bleeps and rhythmic pulses of the machines that keep me in this world, and in this room. She places her blue shoulder bag down on the floor just within my sight, then to the window, opening it outwards with a swift, efficient motion. Momentarily, she leans out with it, and I see the curve of her breast push against the white cotton of her dress. She arches up onto the balls of her feet, and the shapelessness of the uniform is broken by the gentle round of her buttocks. And though my life now only exists in the autonomous actions of machines, and though my breaths are in the steady whoosh of the mechanical lung, my fluid intake in centimetres on the side of a bag of saline solution, and though my discharge is measured in the long discoloured tube that runs to the bag on the side of the bed, and though I am like a battery in the heart of a machine of entropy that doesn't give but sucks the life from me, despite all this, despite the fear she strikes within me, despite all this, I see those breasts, those buttocks, and my body gives its last fevered declaration of its nature. I get an erection. I feel that blood rush stir in my lower stomach, and I see the blanket lift around it, piercing the flat surface of the bed. She turns from the window and stops, and looks straight at it. She laughs a single laugh, a hollow outburst. She comes closer and leans towards my face. I see the grain of her foundation badly applied. Her dark hair, perfectly parted down the centre and clipped back above the ears, frame her face and elongate its features. The nose presses through her skin in the same way my erection pushes against the blankets, causing a tautness that slopes back to her hairline. And when she leans into me, I feel as if her skull beneath is groping out towards me. She looks me in the eye, with only the slightest upturn in the corners of her mouth. She whispers, slow and purposefully, "You are a fucking disgusting thing." She stands up straight. Suzanne's car is coming up the gravel drive. She glances out the window, smooths down the front of her dress. She moves swiftly around the bed to her bag and retrieves from it a vial of clear liquid and a syringe. Keeping an eye on the window, she sucks the liquid into the syringe, her small white hands moving confidently despite the china delicacy of the fingers. And I notice she doesn't seem to have any knuckles. She comes to the side of the bed and takes hold of the IV bag. Her fingers curl around it, their fine points pressing into the plastic. With the other hand, she injects the solution into the bag, and I brace myself for the burning sensation that always follows. I feel it first in my left arm where the drip meets the vein, then up into the shoulder and across into the chest, filling it with tightness as if one of those lily hands is gripping my heart in the same way it grips the bag. As it claws up into my throat and through the muscles in the jaw and my neck, I feel a pressure building in my skull and lights flicker across my eyes. She stares at me, her head slightly cocked, curious. She leans in and says, "Forever." Her voice cold and smooth as her face. Suzanne calls up from the stairs and without pulling her face from mine, she replies in a human tone. "I'm up here with him. He's asleep at the moment." The blackness flickers around my vision. I scream, "Suzanne!" Hops from side to side like a small bird. Drop frozen from the bough. "Suzanne!" Metal blue flashes in those tiny hard eyes without ever. Those tiny eyes withdraw into the black and it closes round my Suzanne without ever having felt sorry for itself. Round my chest, not ever having felt sorry for itself. He pecks the floor, looks at the camera, pauses, and flies away.
Tapes and Tales.
So you've been listening to Tapes and Tales. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've had 3 fantastic stories on tonight. So we had A Small Bird by Bridge Williams, and before that, Nature's Beast by Gareth Heaton. And at the start of the show, we had The Origin of Scars by Andy Knudsen. I want to give a huge thanks to those 3 guys. Fantastic writers. Really great episode, I thought. And I hope you did too. Thanks for listening. We've got a Twitter, obviously. We're at Tapes and Tales, so if you follow us, we'll be able to tell you when the next episode is coming up. Hopefully it's going to be very soon. So thanks for listening again, and take care.